Welcome to Let's Talk Value Chain, a podcast where we explore the different activities, trends, topics, and components within value chains from manufacturing to impacts on supply chains to AI to blockchains.
Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Value Chain. Today, we are speaking to Rachel Eggington, who's leading the initiative with me on Value Chain Innovation Cluster. Rachel comes from a background in manufacturing, driving innovation, including spinning out startups and companies through different university incubators. Together, we are talking about the key value chain aspects within innovation in manufacturing. So let's hear it and share your thoughts.
Welcome to Let's Talk Value Chain. It's great to have you here. So would you like to quickly introduce yourself to our listeners, please?
I'm Rachel. I've worked in manufacturing for all of my working career, usually in that space where new ideas are coming out of the R&D lab and are hitting the customers for the first time. And so trying to make that piece work where actually trying to get new things out to people really super quickly. But at the same time, there's a lot of things you've got to do in the background to get that repeatability and reliability in place. And that's just kind of what makes me tick.
Awesome. So do you want to share how you got started into the manufacturing industry itself?
Of course. So I think probably aged 16, I was certain I wanted to be a lawyer. That was it. I had all my A-levels chosen, was going down that path. And then it was a take your child to work day. And my dad's an accountant. And I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. But that day, he was doing the accounts for a local engineering company, which was a medical devices startup. So only about sort of 10 people there. They were doing some really exciting things with syringe pumps. And I went along for the day. And then by the end of the day, I realized that I wasn't going to be a lawyer. I was going to make things, and I was going to make things in a space where people were inventing for the first time. But that just started me down the path of what I do today.
Awesome. So, similar to me, I've been in manufacturing for over 10 years. Didn't think that I would ever be in that. Didn't know what it meant. But once I've been here, it feels like, the one of the coolest places to work in, which if people are not been in manufacturing, they might actually not think that it's a dirty place to work and it's big machines. But I think that the crucial aspect of that is how much potential of innovation is there and how much is happening in this field today. So what's your thoughts on that and experience on that?
Yeah, and I think you're right. When you're actually surrounded by engineers, and the majority of those engineers want to do things better or differently, whether that's in their own process, make it a bit more optimized for them, make things better, smarter, faster, or whether it's actually, God, we're doing this at all, let's reinvent it. Nobody wants this, everybody wants that. So you're surrounded by people that are always striving for something different. And I think for me, that's the real buzz of manufacturing, is that it's not status quo. It's not just doing what we've always done. You've always got this drive forwards from whatever is pushing it or pulling it. And I think being around people with that much passion about what they're doing, often it's I'm an engineer because I love being an engineer, rather than it's just something you've fallen into. And it means that you get really quite an excited group of people around you, whether that's in a small early stage startup or a large multinational who's trying to bring new product to market. It's always the same environment in sort of different flavors.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what are some of the key elements that you feel drive the value chain for manufacturing innovation?
So a lot of it is around being able to do things in a way that's fitting the company at the time. So bringing in new manufacturing approaches always kind of has game changers to the manufacturing industry. So when 3D printing kind of came out of academia and into the world of industry, all of a sudden there's that excitement that there's a new tool in your toolkit. And I think that's some of the thing that drives some of the change in manufacturing, is that when companies in the supply chain, whether they bring a new piece of software, a new piece of hardware, a new concept into that group, everybody benefits, because it's like, oh, we could do things a little bit like this now. And I think within that supply chain piece, just how it all fits together to make the bigger overall, whether you're getting stuff to your end customer on time or on quality, all of those things matter at every stage in the supply chain going back. And if you make a change at one point, it has this nice knock on and ripple effect. And sometimes that's an exciting, amazing ripple effect, and sometimes it's a complete disaster. And so within that sort of supply chain environment, being able to bring together communities of people that work in those different points in the supply chain and have different approaches means you can get much more coherent piece out of the whole thing for the end customer.
No, absolutely. I think that's a critical aspect that I've seen myself, working for a larger manufacturing organization, trying to drive that technology adoption in something which is in a machine building factory. As much as it's about technology innovation, but it's also about the culture. Because if you don't have the culture, then technologies will come and go, but the culture of being able to adapt remains. And I'm sure that you've seen some similar stuff with companies that you worked with.
Yeah, and you're right, because it's not always that these things will always work or be right for you. So there are definitely some companies that I've worked in that are more accepting of experimenting with new options and then just seeing how far it takes it and be willing to kind of back out of it if it's not okay, or absolutely run with it at the moment it's really important to you. And I think it's not even the size of the company, is it, sometimes, Nishant, that drives that thing. You're right, it's more culture rather than volume or sector that's in there. And that really is that whole embodiment of the approach people take when they come to work. And in innovative companies, it's often the companies that are more open to experimenting and being comfortable that sometimes it's a failure and sometimes it's a success. Trying to be innovative in a company where it has to work first time every time, it just stifles that. And you can say you're as innovative as you like, and you won't be, will you?
I mean, and was some of the discussions I used to have previously. Is manufacturing with the lean principle was built with the concept of right first time, right? So that your quality of products remain good. Because if you get it right first time, you're not reworking on it and not adding more cost to it. Innovation is not that. Innovation is you actually have to make mistakes to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So sometimes there's this, misunderstanding, especially in the manufacturing world, that actually you should be giving your R&D teams, or in general any team, the allowance to fail at stuff, because that's the only way innovation comes about. Because if they already know what they would make, which will have 10x impact without trialing different things, it's very difficult to come by that.
Yeah, and actually the manufacturing team in innovative companies are often quite unusual people. They've kind of got split personalities. They want it to be controlled, but at the same time, they're really happy with it being flexible. So you do get people that are one end or the other end, but actually the people that work best in that kind of creative manufacturing and supply chain environment are ones that can see the benefit of having the controls in place and the iterative continual improvement, but actually don't mind that slightly nerve-wracking piece at the beginning where we're going to put something to a customer that's not quite ready, but the customer understands that, we understand that, and we're all going to learn from it. And so trying to find those people that have the right mindset and then kind of giving them the support network that they need around them to be confident in their decision makings is really quite key in those innovative companies.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on the number of startups or innovations that are coming into manufacturing right now versus other sectors like fintech, health tech, and other more open industry?
It's a really interesting question because it's actually got a hidden answer. So when you go out there and you look, or if you're in the right groups of people, there's so much stuff that's coming out that can make a difference for innovation in manufacturing. There's changes that's happening around the way that we work, the technology, whether it's new materials, whether it's new bits of software, whether it's AI, it's all of these sorts of things. There's so much there that can make a difference, but it's really hidden and it's not signposted to anybody. So if it's an area that you're maybe interested in personally, you've spotted certain things and you bring it into your company. But I often find for me, there's like these big gaps, and there's stuff there I know is happening, but I just can't access it. And I think that's always been my slight frustration in the manufacturing space, that finding out what these new things are that are happening and then working out whether they're going to be relevant for the company that I'm in and people that I'm working with is so tough, and trying to find the time to actually learn about these things and then, evaluate them and bring them in is a really difficult thing, I think, in the manufacturing supply chain space. I mean, do you find similarly as well?
Absolutely. So, I mean, again, I think for me, when I've been in this sort of middleman between in my previous companies of connecting problem owners with the right solution providers, because again, there's so many different ones, and some don't even supply into your industry, right? But actually could be very applicable. The key thing that comes to me always is the problem statements in manufacturing are not open enough, right? And you and I have been in manufacturing, so we know the potential it has, the opportunity it has. And hence, when we look at technology, we can say, actually, this will work very well, even if it's not been used here today. And I think that's one of the key things I feel strongly about is there could be so many more startups, disruptions happening, because the way the industry has worked in engineering and manufacturing is, 10, 20 years ago, when software was hard, there have been this mega giant software companies that have been created, PLM system, ERP system, all of these things, which when you mention to anybody today, they say, oh, it's £1 million investment. It's going to take years for us to implement. But we know from a technology perspective that actually how flexible technology is, and for the value you need, it doesn't have to be a complicated system anymore. And I think that's where the biggest disruption opportunities lie. But not enough people are thinking about that because it's not an open problem statement shared yet, which hopefully, and I think, through the work that we would like to do together, is something that we can make an impact on. What do you feel about sustainability is becoming a very key topic in manufacturing and in the manufacturing value chain in general? How do you see that impacting both innovation and current operations, or just a mindset that, small and large manufacturers are having to think about?
It is coming far more into the language and requirements from the end users and customers. What it's not being driven often is like the only point. Cost really still leads in manufacturing, and functionality is a very close second. But it's actually the sort of the environmental, the sustainability, the ethical sourcing, all of those things are creeping up the agenda, and they're becoming must-haves rather than nice-to-haves. And so when you're thinking about the solutions that you're offering out to those sectors, as sort of innovative companies, you have to know where you fit with that, how you help them with certain things, where your gaps are, so that you can articulate that clearly and explain why that may or may not be an issue for them. So I think it's driving down that awareness into the supply chain and say it's no longer the realms of the large OEMs to make these big statements around how they want their products or their solutions to be for their users. Actually, that responsibility sits at every stage. And when we're thinking about new ideas, new ways of working, new products, actually that has to be in our mindset from the beginning. So, life cycle analysis is just an essential part of your offering onto your customers, if it's B2B, whether it's B2C. And I think equally, a lot of the startups that I've been in and around, they hold some of those values very personally true themselves as well, that actually it's important that they're taking a stance and making a decision around, what is their environmental policy? What are their ethical sourcing requirements? How do they see in terms of their social responsibility? So that's actually a cornerstone of a lot of these startups. And that then pushes that wave of accountability and a good way of manufacturing into that ecosystem.
Absolutely. And I think this is, again, a good example where I see that, the technology to support companies to be able to leverage this without creating a lot of overhead for themselves is critical. Because it's not that companies and suppliers don't want to do this. It's that it's another added task. There's no defined process of, this is what you have to do, or this is the framework that you can utilize to be able to do that in a ease of use way, so that actually you still get, apply all of this, have that for your decision making processes. I think, again, hence, being able to actually bring those potential solutions and problem owners together starts to become so critical, because you're going to have, the cost impact comes in straight away, because, if you can make strategic decision, the cost is no longer just the where it's cheapest, but actually the cost of lost opportunity, the cost of risk, when, a supplier in China would have been cheaper, but when the pandemic hit and you couldn't do anything, actually, I would have rather had another supplier where I was paying slightly more, but be able to access it. And the same thing with the carbon footprint within your supply chain as well, which is starting to become critical. So, we talked about these different topics within manufacturing. I think one of the key topics that you and I connected on was the context of how do we drive community which actually shares these manufacturing problems together, with and linking the innovative companies in manufacturing already there or who could be, to connect with these problem statement owners as well. So would you like to share your motivation towards that?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been really fortunate through my career that people around me are so willing to share knowledge and signpost me to the right directions. And that then later on, I've now got some of those links and those networks and the knowledge holder myself, and I'm able to share that out. But it's always quite discreet, one-to-one. Rachel, could you do this? And I'll ask a friend, do you know somebody that can help me with recruitment? Or that, I'm really struggling to get my grant application pitched correctly. Can you just have a look at the words? And so I think a lot of those things, I realized that if I was needing them, and when we were discussing, where's that pool of resources that is actually really targeted at innovative manufacturing and supply chain companies? You can go out there and there's these great communities for medtech and fintech, and then groups that just make stuff and supply stuff, which just, everybody kind of considers that they're a little bit maybe more boring, or, we can't set up a community. But there is a community there. It's just a lot of one-to-one links that go there. So I think for me, and when we were talking about it, that vision to bring that wider group together so that, you and I can provide support and networking, but they can start to support each other. They can recommend their preferred somebody who's helping them with their sales and marketing activities, that we can actually have this great place where people can go and look at the problem statements for the bigger companies and say, oh, I've got a solution that could maybe help them. Perhaps I could then approach them, and how do I get that relationship going? So kind of creating that self-sustaining group that will allow the manufacturing and supply chain community to become more innovative because they can see more about what needs to be solved, that they've got the resources at their fingertips, and they feel a little bit confident about exploring new things because actually it's come off the back of a recommendation, or they've got some great partners that they didn't have before.
Yeah, awesome. And I think, that's, similarly, what we connected on is that need where, we can connect these problem owners who know that, and who are willing to share that and just expose that repository of problems to people who are looking to actually solve these challenges and be able to actually, get the community to grow, but also provide them this guidance and support. Because, both you and I have been doing that one-to-one with a lot of the partners that we work with, and we get that reciprocated back to us a lot of the times as well. And again, for me, the Value Chain Innovation Cluster initiative, is in that direction where the niche of startups or innovative companies to be able to connect with these problem statements and target and drive that manufacturing innovation can, again, have a huge impact. Would you like to share any advice or any point about the Value Chain Innovation Cluster to any of our listeners?
Yeah, I think, if there's anything that we've talked about today that's striking home, they're like, kind of, that's how we work. That's how I like to be as the company, but also personally, I like to be able to work in that environment where we're sparking ideas, but also having a plan of how to get there, and we can draw on the people around us. That's exactly the people that we want in this manufacturing cluster. And so get on board, send us your application. We'd love to talk to you, find out about what you're doing, and then fold you into that environment where you're going to have a great community around you.
Awesome. So, Rachel, thanks for your time. We are looking forward to kicking off the Value Chain Innovation Cluster shortly. So, keep following Value Chain on LinkedIn and keeping all the updates. There is an application form that we are utilizing where companies can indicate what they do, and we will review into the companies that fit within the scope of support and community that we are trying to grow. And if you fit that, then you'll be invited to this amazing community, which together we look to make a lot of manufacturing innovation impact.
Hope you enjoyed this episode and found our discussion intriguing and exciting. If you want to connect with me or any of our guests, you can see our content and connect details in the summary of this episode. This podcast is sponsored by Value Chain. Value Chain is a leading B2B SaaS platform for intelligent collaboration, performance management, net zero supply chain identification, risk and resilience building, and a platform to help you manage your local and global supply chains.